Hey gang, you've probably, maybe, if you follow my channel, seen the recent cut test with this knife. But there's still a whole knife left to review, so let's get into all the different things I like, things I'm not too bothered about, and things I dislike about the zero tolerance ZT0450. Bam. So, let's just get into what this knife is. This is an everyday carry knife made by Zero Tolerance. The thing about this knife was it was kind of their first, if not the very first, their first really successful small knife. And by a small knife, let's see how small it is. Let's compare it to a paramilitary 2, which is kind of about the size of a previously small Zero Tolerance knife. Zero Tolerance, when they started out, they were making sort of the 3.5 to 4 inch really thick overbuilt blades, and this was the first expedition into something a bit more delicate that was actually really quite successful. I think this is their best-selling knife. So there you go. So that's it next to a paramilitary 2. This is it next to another frame lock flipper, the Spyderco Mantra. So it's about the same size as the Mantra, really. I think the Mantra, if you spread it out, would have a bit of a longer handle. Maybe not. No, it feels longer, but I'll get into that later. And let's put it next to it. This is a Rook knife. This is a Rook 105, P105K. It's a bit of a bigger knife, isn't it? And let's most prudently look into it, because I like this knife. I like the same things about this knife as I like about this knife here, the Benchmade 940. Which you can see, apart from the handle, really is about the same size blade-wise. So the cutting edges on both, the Benchmade is a tiny bit bigger, but it's about 3.25 inches or 3.1 or just around that area, just over 3-inch blades. So the thing I like about this knife the most, I'll get into it, is looking at the Benchmade. I like this because it's a nice thin, slim knife in the pocket, as in you can have this in the pocket, and you can have next to it, you can have your phone. And that's, still not quite a pocket full of stuff even. So that's why I really like these narrower knives. So I really like the general sort of, it's almost like a flipping version of this knife, which would be a great idea, Benchmade, come on. But anyway, so I really like that. That's my favourite aspect about this design, especially a flipper. The one thing you do end up being stuck with is a bit of a jabby tab, but this tab is really not too bad at all. So it is definitely the widest part of the knife still, but it's really well done. So the first thing I really like about the knife is that. So the overall design, I think it's a pretty good looking blade. I'd put that as something that I do like about it. It's about as cliche frame lock flipper as you can get now, but really that's because this came out in 2015 and there's just been so many similar knives come out to this blade. Whether this was the first or not, I'm not sure, but really it's generic a little bit, but it's also really simple and really nice looking too, and it does have a little flourish in those red little backspaces there, which I think are really cool, and add definitely some much needed colour to the knife there. I like the branding on this blade as well. So if you zoom in here, they've gone quite tasteful, little Zero Tolerance just engraved in it. It's nicely done. Nothing on the other side, and then just on the blade they've just gone with a little touch of just your brands, your Sinkovich, your materials, really small. And then they've got some serial number there for some reason, which I never know why they do that. Why? Why would you do that? It's probably to show it's real and not fake or something, but geez, I'd really rather they didn't. Anyway, but in terms of an overall branding thing, it's definitely on the good side. It's a lot better than other knives tend to do. So, the blade shape is something I do like. So, and that's the sort of the blade shape in 2 dimensions here, just how that looks. It's got a nice bit of tip, it's got a good bit of flat and a good bit of belly. The swedge on the top is more sort of just for looks really. It doesn't do much because it actually widens out again here, but it is just for appearance. It's got some semi-functional jimping on the top, but little flipper knives like this generally lock your hand in behind that flipper anyway, so grip isn't usually a huge problem, especially if it's just an everyday carry type knife. So, the thing that is best about this knife though, however, is the action. So if you hold it like this is how I hold my flippers, so I don't have to struggle that some do with this knife, which I will get into. That just flies out. It is the second best action on a knife that I've ever had, and it's probably the best overall, because the other knife that has great action has a bit of a drawback, which I'll spoil it. The best action I've had on a knife is on this Rook knife. That's why it's here. It's just insane. It is so smooth. It's effortless. It is full shut. It's a $40 knife too. That is really something. But the drawback with this one is it has a weird squeaky noise. Don't know if you can hear that. I have to hold up to the camera. And I just can't get it out. So in terms of having a slightly worse action, and by worse it's super relative, you know, a 1% worse action and no squeak probably makes it the best. So that's probably my favourite thing about the knife. But apart from that, you know, it's got good build quality, the lockup's fine, it's got no issues that you would expect. Zero tolerance knives are always really well put together. So let's talk about the things I'm neutral about next. And it's looking right at us, the clip. The clip has two things that I don't like about it. I don't like how they've gone and put ZT on the side there, but I'll quite easily polish that off. And I do wish there was some levity for a deep carry clip to be installed. There's really not, because it'll either block the lanyard loop, and this is even thinking aftermarket. I'll have to have a look, but you'd have to either go out so you can screw in this way. Yeah, I just can't quite see how you do that, and so therefore you've got about that much sticking out in your pocket all the time. I'll just do some in-pocket shots as I'm talking, but it's you know, it's not the most discreet or low-profile carry, which is a real shame because it's low-profile in terms of, you know, dimensions this way. So it would have been really nice if it was low-profile in terms of this dimension sticking out of your pocket. But hey, when it is sticking out your pocket, you can gaze upon those awesome little little spaces there too. So there you go, much of a muchness. Now the grip. The grips are neutral for me because it's not that great for larger hands. You see here, it is just a little bit too small for me to comfortably get all 4 fingers in there. In fact, it's a lot too small. It's basically a 3-finger knife and I have to hang my 4th over the edge there. That's not super uncomfortable, but I wouldn't want to cut with it all day. And there's no real other movement, there's no choils, there's no real, it's very much set in its way. So you need to fit your fingers between these parts comfortably, all 4 of them, or you're going to have to hang one off the end here. If you had medium-sized hands, you'd probably get all 4 in there just fine. But with me, it hangs off the edge, so I'm going to have to call it a neutral. It's not something that's bad about the knife, it's just designed, it's like shoes. Not every shoe can fit every foot. I don't know, there's different shoe sizes, but you can't change the size of every knife. So it's kind of just, you get what you get, and you can't stop them from making, you know, more custom things, because in a small hand, this would probably be really, really snug and really, really comfy. Everything else is done just fine in it. There's like 2-stage cornering, all that sort of stuff. Everything else is alright. It's just, for me, it's just a little bit awkward. I've got the large-sized hands, so there you go. So that's just the other neutral part that I would certainly have to point out. If you have the larger hands, just be prepared. You'll probably sit a bit awkwardly on this little thing here until you get the hang of it. But everyday carry, you're not using it like crazy anyway. You're just using it, taking it out, using it, putting it back. That's my experience with the knife, at any rate. Let's get on to the obvious bad. Alright, so this steel is soft in this knife. It cuts way below what the expectation of S35VN would be. In terms of my rope cut test, which I will link to, I've done 3 tests. Well, I've done two different knives I've tested 3 times. So I've done the Zero Tolerance 0909. I did that twice because that scored about 110-ish cuts through the rope. And this, if this is all jargon to you, check out my rope cut test. Basically, I see how many times a knife blade can cut through rope before it stops effortlessly slicing paper that I hold in the air. S30V in this Benchmade here did 175, I think, in that ballpark anyway. And that's on a very similarly ground blade, as you can see. It's also a flat ground blade with about the same level of sort of taper down to the edge. Very, very similar. And this one actually has a bit of a narrow edge. And this one did 170-ish cuts. Can't remember exactly, but not important, not super important. The steel on the previous Zero Tolerance did 113, and this one here did 89, and that was after I backed the edge all the way up. When I first started with the factory edge of this knife, this bevel was probably about as low as this Spyderco bevel is probably how it came. Fine on this knife because it's a flat ground, but on a saber ground, sort of slightly thicker, chunkier knife, you need a bit more. So anyway, I thought, well, maybe that's the problem. So I backed the edge all the way up and did the test again, and it went from about 40 cuts to 89 cuts, which it's not terrible. It's still twice as good as, your 8CR13 MOVs, it's better than VG10, but it's not as good as D2 or 154 CM. So this edge is not the factory. This shining bit here is about probably a millimeter or two higher towards this part of the blade than you get from the factory. So doing this does make it cut a lot better. So now it cuts really well, but the steel is still going dull quicker than I would want. I'm not sure if that's a zero tolerance problem. If they're heat treating it, I'm not sure if it's S35VN. I haven't had other steels, so I'm only going to comment on what I know. But I definitely need to bring it up because you spend $220 on a knife, and if you are expecting edge retention up with the S30Vs, which I think we're all probably familiar with the origins of S35V, and if you're watching knife videos, you may well be. It's just I think it was developed in company with Chris Reeve once again, just as a more sharpenable, tougher version of S30V, which had some chipping problems, just some minor stuff like that, from real stuff that not only knife perfectionists would really notice. But so they improved this to this, but this knife is not an improvement over this because I haven't had any of the chipping problems. This one sharpens just fine. This one's just softer. It's probably a zero tolerance thing, but that will definitely be confirmed tomorrow when I do my tests on my Kaiser Gemini, which I should have brought up here to show off. Anyway, that's what a whole video is for tomorrow. Anyway, so that is the main thing that I needed to sort of bring up, and it's not nice. It's not a nice thing. I really wish it wasn't the case. I was hoping that this would be the knife that showed that my 0909 was on its own an example of just a slight whoopsie in heat treat, but instead it actually did a bit worse. Probably not supported by the grinds, but even just the very edge, that exact terminating bleeding edge, that's really what that test is testing, and it still didn't really do the job. So I'm not a scientist, I'm not doing crazy experiments, but I think it's telling enough to show that it did so much worse than like S30V on a very similarly ground blade. Of a similar, actually a bit more thickness, it did so much worse than S30V. There's got to be something in that Rockwell. So there you go. Cool. So that's the full like, dislike, neutral on the knife. How do I feel about it overall? You know what? It's still like, if this had the awesome steel, if you could get this in steel that lasted for as long as it was supposed to, this would be an excellent knife, especially if you had the medium hands. If you have medium hands and can get this in the ZDP, which I assume is treated better, or I hope is treated better, this is a 10 out of 10. The action, the construction, everything else about it is done really well. If you've got larger hands, probably, unless you're really enamored with the look of this one, you might even want to have a look at the 0450, which is the sort of the one with the 3 and the blade goes out to about there and the handle's longer. Effectively the same look though. You might want to have a look at that, but if you're not fussed about having to just hang your pinky over there, I think you're going to enjoy this knife as well. It's just the S35VN. My experience isn't positive with it, and I got to point that out to you because this is a $220 knife, and if you go and spend your $220 and you got it and yours perform the same as mine and I didn't tell you, I'd feel bad about it. So it's just my experience. Zero tolerance has a massive fan base, so it's obviously not troubling everybody, but maybe not everyone is completely testing the edge of their knives, and maybe you shouldn't. Maybe we shouldn't be. Like maybe we are just using them a few times a day, every now and then. So maybe even the 89 passes this did do is fine, but still got to point it out because I've lived it, bro. I've lived it. Anyway. One other thing I forgot to mention. So this knife here, the action is amazing, but it's got a finicky detent, which is it's just delicate. So if your finger's off that, it's fine. That's how I open the knife anyway. But if you have, a tendency to pinch here, it's just not going to come out because you're pressing the detent into the detent ball track really hard. It's delicate. It's finely tuned, so you can throw it out by applying pressure here. So it's fine. You can rest your finger on it, but the minute you start pushing, which often you do to load your finger with energy sort of thing, you're going to stop it from deploying. So you just got to hold back a bit here. Try and use this little bit on the clip to rest your finger and just so you're not doing it right. And there you go. It's absolutely fine. And you will get some of the best action going in EDC knives right now. Just thought I'd bring that up as well. Not really a good, not really a bad, it's just kind of how the knife works. So there you go, ZT0450. I wish it was a completely glowing review because I really thought it would be yesterday before I did my cut test on it, but there you have it. Thanks for watching, dudes. Stay tuned for this knife versus the Lion Steel versus the Kaiser Gemini coming up very soon. See which one of these EDC frame lock widely acclaimed flippers is really the best in the business. Comparing everything from steel to flipping to blade shape to handle design to everything. It's going to be fun. Alright, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.